Welcome to the Life Success and Legacy Podcast. We're glad you're here, and we hope you enjoy the episode.
Hey, everybody. We want to welcome you back to the next episode of the Life Success Legacy Podcast. I'm Chris Bay, joined by two of our mics today. I've got Michael Crawford and Michael King Everett joining
Come
in.
on.
What's up, fellas?
Howdy.
Not too much.
Howdy. Hey, MC, you got a car show coming up this weekend?
I do, yeah.
Tell us about that, and tell our listeners. Tell them about a little bit about you and your you like to tinker.
Yeah, I grew up fixing cars, working on old cars, and the car that I actually drove to high school, 1951 Ford sedan, is the car that's in my garage that I'll take to the car show this weekend. So, been taking some evenings and polishing her up a little bit. You know, gotta make her shine a little bit.
Yeah.
Where is it out at South Park?
Yeah, it's here in Lawrence on Mass Street in South Park, and
about how many cars will they have show up?
You know, there's usually a couple hundred.
Mm-hmm.
Oh wow!
Yeah, it's a decent size.
It's a whole culture, isn't it?
It really is. You know, I came from South Central Kansas, where the culture was much bigger, and so this is one of the bigger ones in Lawrence. There's another one in Ottawa that was last weekend, I think, or the weekend before, and that one's huge. They can get up to, I think they've gotten nearly 1,000 cars before.
Okay. Very cool.
Yeah,
very
fun
cool
stuff.
So you got your tinkering with your car crew, and then Mike Everett's got his golf community that he's going to be joining. You and your son are heading out next week, right?
We'll be up in Boston and Rhode Island and close to the Hamptons in New York. Yeah, it'll be Snooty City, baby. I'll tell you what. Like this old Kansas boy, he doesn't fit in that area. I'll just tell you.
Fish out of water.
I'm just thinking of the cutoffs and the wife beater.
Wearing your Daisy Dukes out on the course. Nobody wants to see that. Okay, let's get down to business for our listeners. Listeners, thanks for putting up with us. Oftentimes we get questions, whether it's when people register for an event or they chime in, they call on the consult or whatever, and their main question is, how do I know what size policy to start with, right? And the short answer is you don't need to worry about that because we help you figure that out through our process. And as we were talking in preparation for this, really there's two primary groups of clients that help us think about how to approach that. One is the client who they're really trying to turn the wind current on their debt. Okay. Mm-hmm. That's one lane that we go down. Another lane is someone who maybe doesn't have a lot of debt. Maybe they just have a mortgage, or maybe their goal is just to build their pool of capital so that they can then utilize that for investment purposes or new purchases or whatever. Those are kind of the two lanes that we go down when we're thinking about that. And what this looks like is on Mondays, our whole team gets together and we design strategies for our potential clients. And we go through our process. So I'm going to call on the two mics just to kind of banter back and forth about, okay, we're getting ready for a Monday. And let's say we've got a client who is wanting to turn the wind current on their debt. And they've got, some of the information that we might have. Mike Crawford, you do a great job in our boot camps, kind of breaking down with our software, like the different kinds of debts. Can you give example for folks of what we would be looking at and how we would design or come up with that size policy?
Yeah, so actually that was what I was going to mention, is that we created some software, 4 or 5 years ago that helps us do that. And I say helps us, it doesn't do the math on determining the size of the policy, but since it organizes everything in such a manner that we can break things down into the assets that the client has, and you could turn those into a term that we like to use a lot called activators, where we might be able to see in that list of assets possible activators that might be used to kickstart their system. And then we also break the debts down into chunks. Now they're not granular to the point of like 7 or 8 categories, but we do break it down into some larger categories like your mortgages, your vehicles, your credit cards, and then your loans. And for the most part, that's going to capture the most amount of debts that people do live with day to day, right? And so by taking a snapshot, if you will, of all of those areas, assets down through the different debts, we can kind of start looking, and because we've done it so long, it almost has become second nature, but like we can look at each of these items, and when we see them listed out, and I'm just going to be honest with you, it's almost like we just kind of all blurt it out. It's like, yep, that's probably a 10K. Now, that number sounds ridiculous to the average person who's coming brand new to IBC, right? Who's going to spend $10,000 on life insurance in a year?
Nobody.
So when you're talking about an annual premium of $10,000 going into, we call them premium deposits going into the policy, that sounds insane.
It sounds absolutely wackadoodle, right? And you know, it's true, right? You know, because like who's coming up with that dollar every year? And that's the brilliance of not only the strategy system that we've put together and that we implement weekly, but it's really how we coach our team internally, as well as the clients that come to the table to find that wind current. In other words, like the dollars that they're sending out the door currently to those debts that we just mentioned, and find a way to turn that dollar back to their system where they can reuse it year over year and not have to come up with new money.
Yeah, so jump in.
Okay, so I want to expound on that just a little bit more, because if you think about it, principle number 3 is don't steal from your system. Yep. And we really hound on these principles all the time. So if those people are utilizing their activators, getting their policy started, and we're getting rid of some of this outside debt and turning that wind current, then economic value added comes into the picture then now too, because they take the payments that they were making to that outside debt, turning the wind current now in their favor, and now replenishing their system. Principle number 3, again, don't steal from yourself, so they don't have to come up with the new money every year to make their premium deposits. I'm just expounding on Crawford's thought process, because just like he said, we do this so much that it has truly become second nature. So what we've got to do is bring it down to table level for the potential new listener who's going, hold on a second, wind current, don't steal, EVA, but yet.
Let's do a quick 30-second timeout. Mike Everett, you're always good at taking us back to the book, Nelson's book, Becoming Your Own Banker. And people often wonder why we focus on turning the wind current. First of all, let's define wind current, okay? Why do we focus on that instead of immediately focusing on investments or things like that? So where does the wind current come from, that concept? Where does the wind current come from? And why do we focus on turning the wind current in designing these strategies?
You want me to take that?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so in Nelson's book, he always talks about the fact that just think about the payments that you're making right now. You got your house, you got your car, you got your credit card, student loans. And we could add a million different things. Those dollars that are going out the door, that is fighting the wind current. So imagine if we were flying a plane into a wind, because that's debt that we're incurring or have incurred, and we make those payments. Do we ever get that money back? So what would happen if all of a sudden we created a system, IBC, and we started to eliminate this outside debt, and we were able to transfer the outside debt to inside debt? Now all of a sudden we're not fighting the wind current, but the wind current is going with us, because now all of a sudden we're not making payments out the door, they're coming in the door. So the wind is actually helping this thing go faster.
And you can actually use that wind to pay your premium deposits.
So you actually get right then and there 2 uses of those dollars. Number 1, the same payment that you were making to Visa, MasterCard, the car company, now goes back to pay your system. One one use.
Mhm.
And then at the start of the next annual policy premium year, you get to use those dollars again to pay the premium. And then after the premium's paid, you take another policy loan, number 3, to pay down future debt as well. Oh my gosh. Nobody's teaching this stuff like this. Sorry, I got excited.
Yeah.
By the way, it's all in this crazy book written by Nelson Nash, Becoming Your Own Banker. This is why we love doing this stuff right there.
And what Mike just talked about, and with all his arms and pointing and all the stuff that he was just doing, if you join us for one of our boot camps, and you can register for any of our learning events, they're free on our website at lifesuccesslegacy.com. Our boot camps, we actually show this with multiple learning styles. We draw it out conceptually, and then Crawford actually shows with our software, showing a client, a fictional client, turning the wind current. So you can see month by month exactly where those dollars are flowing to show it. So,
and I think that that's actually the thing that I wanted to follow up with on what I had said, then what Everett had added is, one of the most powerful aspects about our software isn't the fact that it does math for us. That's calculations that almost anybody can do, right? I mean, we're not talking difficult math equations here for the most part. The magic in our software, in my opinion, is the ease of visual use, right? It's simple to read, it's simple to understand, not just for an agent, but for the client. Because once they see their numbers, how many times have we said that, Chris Bay? I remember when you were traveling, and me and Everett and you were traveling to Nebraska to the chiropractic events, and you would sit down in the booth with a potential client, and at that moment, write down all their numbers and start working out formula and trying to figure out what that could look like for them in the moment, because you knew that if they saw how their numbers could affect their lives, even in the first 13 months, you knew it would at least trigger an interest in looking deeper and understanding why that works, what is actually occurring. And that's what they have to see, right? Is any of us are skeptical, and we get this all the time. People are skeptical, and that's great, because what do we say, Everett? It makes us better at our job.
It is. It does.
Okay, so one last thing I want to touch on before we transfer to this next type of client is, one of the reasons that we focus on turning the wind current is, in Nelson's research, he found that average America was losing 34.5% of their after-tax dollars to the interest on their debt. 34.5%. That if we can turn that wind current and get that 34.5% from going out the window, going in your window, and you get to reuse it, that's one of the most powerful investments you can do, is simply by turning your wind current. So that's a reason why oftentimes we are actually focusing on turning the wind current on people's outside debt. Okay, let's transition now, because not everybody who comes to us has debt. Right?
Nope.
Majority of folks do, but not everybody. Some people come for various reasons. We always talk about the 4 things that IBC does. Number 1 is eliminate outside debt. We just talked about that group of clients, but there's still 3 other areas that IBC deals with. Second is building a pool of cash you can use for new purchases, investments, etc. The third is passive income, building passive income, money that flows to you that you don't have to work for. And then the fourth one is the tax-free wealth transfer. So sometimes we have clients who come to us, let's talk about this number 2, and they don't have any outside debt.
Right.
They might have pools of cash sitting in different places that they say, hey, I'd like to funnel this money each year into this policy as premium deposits, build it up, and then be able to use it for various reasons, right? So one of you guys want to talk about that type of client, or an example of that type of a client where we're looking at how do we determine the size of policy related to what they have in terms of what they tell us they want to put in?
Well, when we're attacking those kind of clients and they're coming to us and they just are really wanting to build a pool, that's when we sit down and we want to know what their goals are. We want to know how do you want IBC to work in that situation? So they may have a student getting ready to go to college. They may have a wedding coming up. They may have additional car purchase, or they love to travel. I mean, there's a bucket of things that they could do. They're also, because some of these clients don't have any debt, they have, and usually it's the older clients, right? They might have kids who are carrying debt.
Mm-hmm.
So when you're looking at those kinds of situations, then we create a way that we can actually utilize that to learn how to finance some of these other things that are going on. That pool of cash can be deployed to be utilized in those situations.
And
I see it
MC,
as
can you talk a little bit about, so I don't want to interrupt your
Yep.
thought, but I'm going to drop this in and you can add
Please.
to it. When we're doing our software, we have the option of saying if we're going to use new money or we're going to use
Right.
cash values inside the system. Okay, go run with that.
Yeah, so to expound upon that, to help explain new money to a client, is we just talked about this $10,000 fictitious premium, annual premium deposit, right? Most clients that come to us don't want to have to come up with $10,000 every single year. And our job is to create a system where they can reuse the dollars, as Mike Everett explained a few minutes ago, throughout their system. And then when that premium comes due again, they can use that dollar inside their system to pay that second year premium, so on and so forth, right? What Chris is explaining is that, let's say we have that client who we're transitioned to, that is maybe debt-free, or the only thing they have maybe is a very large mortgage or something of that nature, and it's not imperative to pay it down today. They're just, they know they want to get rid of it, but they have a pool of money that they want to start capturing more efficiently, right? And use those dollars more wisely and put them in less risk. So they might use new money, i.e. dollars that they're coming up with out of their savings account or out of their other, channels of assets.
I'll give an example.
Pull too.
When I resigned from the school district, I had a 403B
Mm-hmm.
and I had my Kansas Public Retirement. I wanted to start funneling that money through my banking system, right? Where I can get 3 uses of those dollars.
Mm-hmm.
So that's an example where I had the opportunity to use new money for those premiums each year.
Right. Absolutely. And that just allows us to make the system grow quicker, because we're not depleting the cash value to pay the premiums, right? Mm-hmm. And obviously, if you go back and listen to our podcasts about how we build the policies and policy design and all that stuff, you'll understand why that becomes important once we get past year 4, right? When we drop that paid up additions rider, where we can really start churning the system with, especially if it was new money. But all that to be said, what I think we can really teach people that come to us that don't have a lot of debt, or don't have the type of wind current to turn that the average client does, is how to be more efficient with the dollars that they are spending. Are they talking to them about what things can they prepay in their lives using a policy loan, let's say home and auto insurance, and maybe get a deduction in that premium, and then just make that same payment back to themselves, right? That's still a wind current, in the sense that they are using dollars that they have available through their system to get a break, if you will, potentially, or a small discount by prepaying a full annual year instead of maybe monthly, right? Or figuring out a way to buy groceries and living expenses that they can run through a credit card that earns them points and just pay it off monthly, things like that, where we teach them just to be a little more mindful of how the dollar flows through their hand.
So on average, let me just give a range. Let's talk about the modes of premiums. The vast majority of our clients do an annual premium. And the reason for that is you can dump money in and then turn around 2 weeks later and have access to the cash value available to utilize for whatever purpose you want. So that's why most people use the annual. But let's just say that, I'm thinking of a young 19-year-old client of ours who is actually the son of some clients of ours. And he works in a coffee shop. He's got a truck loan that he wants to pay off. And he doesn't have a bunch of money sitting in the bank or any place. And so, but he could save X amount of dollars each month, with his paycheck. So he just started with $250 a month in his premium. So that just builds up over the course of the year.
Yeah.
And he always has a percentage of that cash value of those premium deposits that he's put in that he has access to, but he's building up his pool to the point where he can then take a loan against it and pay off that truck and turn that truck payment back his direction as a loan repayment, right? Yep. So we've got clients who do, $250 a month, not a lot of them, but it is possible.
Yep.
And then we've got people who will put in 10, 20, 50, over $100,000 a year in premium deposits. So there's a real range. And again, kind of like I started out at the beginning, our clients don't have to figure that out. We're going to help them through our experience and through our process identify what is going to be a level of premium deposit where they can gain benefit from it, but it's not going to overextend them and make them nervous or anxious about their process. Mike Everett?
I've got a thought or two on that. So if you're just listening to us for the very first time, let me say this out loud. If we can't put you in a better place tomorrow than you are today, you shouldn't do IBC. And then the second thought I'd like to say is, you just gave us a pretty large range of premiums, $250 a month up to $100,000. Now, if you're listening to us for the very first time and you're focused on this 20, 30, 50, 100,000, forget that. Mm-hmm. Because I'm telling you, we've even had people who could afford that kind of premium at 50 or 100,000. And we said, hey, we don't want you to go that big because we know this works. You do not. Yeah. So we want them to get their hands on their IBC plans. We want them to understand what they're doing. So we talk about this all the time. Confidence and competence. Mm-hmm. We want them to be confident in what they're doing through the teaching that our team gives, but we want them to become competent in being able to utilize their IBC plan at the highest level. So keep in mind, we are going to pull you off the ledge before you even have an opportunity to get crazy about IBC.
One of our buddies, Ron Swall, as we talk about IBC, because he's incredibly passionate about IBC and he's always bugging us and wanting to talk to us about IBC. And he says, knowing what I know now, man, I started those first policies way too small. And we're like, yes, but there's a method to that madness, right?
There really is. There really is. And so this is part of, the long-term trusting relationship that we create. Because we want people to understand there's a reason, a method to our madness. Yes. There really, truly is, because we want them to know that we didn't just swing for the fences at the start of this thing. We've got to show them there's a way in which you tackle your first IBC plan or two. Yeah. Because we want you to understand what you're doing. That we care. We really do care. Yeah.
Yeah. Good stuff, guys. Anything else that we want to share regarding how we determine the size of the policy for clients?
I would just say, to reiterate how you started it, Chris, and sort of the path we've taken is come to the table open-minded about the process, follow our process. It might seem daunting when you join a webinar and Mike Everett says, this book is a course of instruction of 10 hours. We're not going to make you sit for 10 hours in a boot camp. But over the course of the time that you're going through our process, you're going to invest 10 hours of time in learning and educating and being coached before you even get to the idea of an application. There won't even be a discussion of an application until we've followed that process. And the reason we do that is because of what Everett just said, long-term trusting relationships. If we cannot build that foundation with you, it is not worth it to risk the friendship.
Nope.
Amen. Boy, that's good stuff right there.
Yeah. Good stuff. All right, guys, thanks for jumping in on this one. Appreciate it. To our listeners, Check us out at lifesuccesslegacy.com, our website. There's lots of resources there, including more podcasts like this one. You can also sign up and register for an upcoming webinar, which Mike Everett typically does those about every other Monday, twice a month or so. He does those live. And that's a great introduction to IBC and Nelson's book, Becoming Your Own Banker. And then if you really want to dive in and you've done the webinar, then we recommend you join us for a boot camp. We have another one coming up in October, I believe. They're usually
21st.
October 21st. That's a Saturday. We typically do those on Saturday mornings, Central Time. That's 9:30 a.m. to about 12:30 p.m. And that is a deep dive. Like, you will walk away feeling very informed about how IBC works. You may not know what it looks like specifically in your case, but I bet you'll start to get an idea of what it could look like for you. And then, of course, when you do your consult with one of us, and we send you the software link and we start diving in, that's really when the fun teaching is, because it's your numbers and it's your life. And that's where it's really going to sink in your brain, like, okay, I get this. This is making sense to me. Right?
Oh, man.
Yeah. All right. Thanks for joining us, and we'll catch you on our next episode.